Why does stillness make us so uneasy? And why does a woman's silence, especially the silence of her body, so often disturb others and even herself? We grow up in a culture that worships movement as a symbol of meaning, equates desire with worth, and believes that constant connection is a sign of emotional health. From a young age, women are taught their presence must shine, their emotions must be available, and their bodies must be an unending invitation. If she chooses to withdraw, if she stops orbiting around the gaze of others, if her body no longer performs in the dance of desire, the world quickly labels her cold, unstable, or lacking. But what if her silence isn't a disappearance, but a declaration? What if the moment her body turns inward is not an ending, but a beginning of a deeper journey, one that moves inward? There comes a time in every woman's life when external stimulation is no longer the answer, when old roles begin to loosen, when even the most intoxicating embrace can't fill the void. And in those quiet, inexplicable moments, the sacred begins to speak, not in words, but in a subtle tremble in the chest, a nameless calling, a distant memory of something that has always been there, waiting for her to return. Carl Jung believed that when the ego can no longer carry the weight of pretending, the soul begins to speak, not loudly, not clearly, but through the gentlest unease, in the form of silence. This silence is not emptiness. It is a language, an ancient language, older than words, a call from the deepest part of us. So in this video, we'll contemplate what truly unfolds within a woman when she chooses abstinence, not as a rejection of love or pleasure, but as a sacred act of return, a gateway to clarity, inner power, and self-direction. Together, we'll listen to the journey of transformation that begins when the body becomes still and the soul begins to whisper in its own language. In today's world, a woman's worth is too easily reduced through the lens of desirability. How seductive is she? Is she emotionally available? How does she show up in romantic relationships? From media to movies to the patterns repeated in everyday conversations, the message echoes constantly. To be desired is to be alive. And within that framework, abstinence, in any form, physical, emotional, or from shallow connections, is rarely seen as an act of freedom, but rather as a symptom of lack, a quiet failure. But when a woman chooses to withdraw, whether by awareness or by instinctual whisper, she begins to hear something resonating beneath the noise of expectation and role play. This is not a denial of the body, nor is it an effort to suppress the self. It is a redirection, a quiet movement of sacred energy, from the outer world to the inner. Jung once wrote, "Nothing that is repressed can stay buried, it will transform." And in abstinence, in this seemingly invisible pause, the process of transformation begins to smolder. As the body quiets, subtle senses begin to awaken. She starts to dream more, feel more deeply. She begins to sense that her inner world is moving to a different rhythm, a rhythm that has always been there, just hidden beneath the noise of an outward-focused life. What the world often calls loneliness, she begins to realize is not an emptiness to be filled, but a sacred space to listen to what has always been present, beyond time, beyond form, beyond even names. This is the first milestone of transformation, the end of a role and the beginning of awareness. She no longer speaks to respond, no longer shows up to fit others' expectations. She is silent, not because she has run out of words, but because for the first time in her life, she begins to listen. And in that silence, the voice of the soul arises, not loud, not accommodating, but so authentic it can melt away all pretense. Yet that voice does not comfort, at least not at the start. When she lets go of the constant stimulation from gazes, desires, and praise, another wave rises, emptiness. The things that once upheld her ego, names, roles, love, beautiful images, begin to collapse like old doors shutting. She is no longer someone belonging to someone else, no longer a lover, no longer a muse, no longer an ideal image. She stands face to face with herself, whole and bare. And in that moment, pain emerges like a ritual. Jung calls this the encounter with the shadow, the hidden part of the soul, where suppressed desires are stored, unlived truths reside, and instinctual parts once denied in exchange for love. Now, abstinence is no longer a gentle choice. It becomes fierce. It strips bare. It demands radical honesty. She begins to doubt. The once sacred silence sometimes turns into a sharp blade. Old friends drift away. Society whispers that she is wasting time, losing value. But beneath all those voices, she knows she is not running away. She's going deeper. It is not a separation, but a ritual of return, a return to the deepest layer of the soul, the layer once exchanged for conformity, desire, or applause. And within that very pain, something ancient begins to awaken. Old identities shatter, but another self is being formed, steadier, more whole. Over time, she begins to feel silence no longer as a desert, but as fertile soil where creation is nurtured. The emptiness becomes a womb. The stillness becomes the process of gestation. She is no longer the one waiting to be chosen, but the one choosing herself. Abstinence is no longer a sign of lack, but a sacred intention. She is not rejecting, she is protecting. Protecting something fragile yet full of potential, forming quietly in the dark. And then, little by little, she begins to feel herself as a unified and sovereign being. No need for validation. No need for display. No need to be seen. Her worth is no longer measured by attractiveness, but by the depth of truth she dares to live. Jung calls this the process of individuation, the journey where a person becomes whole, not by eliminating the shadow, but by embracing it, illuminating it, and allowing both instinct and soul to step together onto the stage of life. As an integrated whole, in that state, she is no longer driven by invisible hunger, for recognition, for love, or for being seen. Instead, every movement she makes is shaped by clarity, not from outside, but from the deepest core of consciousness. Daily rituals are no longer habits, they become ceremonies. She moves more slowly, breathes as if in prayer, speaks less but with meaning. Every gesture is soaked in presence, as if even time bows to listen. Silence, once seen as emptiness, now becomes a primordial language. The language of intuition, soul, and unspoken truth. And her power is no longer something to be flaunted, but a still force, steady as a mountain, light as breath, yet untouchable. What was once called self-denial now reveals a deeper essence, an inner birthing ritual, where a woman is not forced to birth another, but to give life to her true self. And then, as if a veil is lifted, something dawns in the stillness. Discomfort is no longer a burden, but a torch of awareness. Loneliness, once heavy as chains, now hums like a meditation chant. The inner world, once chaotic from cravings, becomes an empty space that is enough, silent yet full. She is no longer swept away by the desire to become someone for someone else. Her energy no longer scatters in invisible chases. It gathers, converging into a clear flow, leading her back to wholeness. The woman who once feared emptiness now guards her silence like a temple. She knows her presence is not a substitute for lack, but a pure gift that needs no proof. And then, the world, accustomed to simple patterns, begins to misunderstand her. Not because she is closed off, but because she no longer dissolves easily to become a mirror reflecting others' desires. She does not love to complete herself, but to reflect who she has become. Carl Jung wrote, "What you reject will imprison you, but what you integrate will transform you." This woman has not fled from the darkness, but chosen to enter it with open eyes. She has turned denial into awareness, turned silence into a guide, and most importantly, she no longer waits for anyone to save her. Because in that journey, she has become her own savior. And if love ever returns one day, it will not find someone waiting and longing, but a soul returned to her sacred, sovereign place. She no longer lowers herself to create connection. She no longer melts away to be accepted. Instead, she becomes a quiet flame, where truly kindred souls recognize the light and come to it themselves. That journey was never a lament for what was missing, but a profound awakening, that nothing outside can nourish the soul within while it remains asleep. The silence within her body is not emptiness. It is the sacred stillness before transformation. A withdrawal that seems like disappearance, but is actually a triumphant homecoming to the self. When a woman turns inward, not out of fear but out of desire to be reborn, she does not step back from the world. She is present, deeply, quietly, and inviolably. The awakening voice inside her does not need to shout to be heard. It is gentle but undeniable. Once it rises, it carves itself as an unforgettable truth. The path she walks is not rejection of life, but a ritual of remembrance, that there is a source of power deep within her that needs no one's validation to know she is present. She no longer seeks love as a healing balm. She comes to love as a whole, no longer afraid of loneliness because she has learned to walk with herself, with reverence, with truth, and with unfeigned presence. If these words awaken something within you, please leave a trace in the comments. Perhaps your voice will touch another soul, exactly at the moment they need it most. And if you long to continue walking on the journey of self-discovery, in stillness, in depth, walk alongside Mind and Meaning. Here, every word is spoken with mindfulness, and every silence is preserved as a sacred space for transformation. You are not alone. The pain you carry is not a sign of being lost, but an invitation to return, to a place where you can listen to the whisper of your own soul. Believe in the path unfolding right beneath your feet, even if it is so silent that it seems as if nothing is happening. Because when the body is still, consciousness begins to awaken, and the soul speaks only through truth.